two of the men leading the charge over at Uncrowned.com. You know, they once did a little show together. Before 3PAC, there was the man and the myth. We had Chuck Mindenhall, the man in the hat, the mayor of the Nutmeg State, and we had Shaheen Al-Shatti, the now editor-in-chief of Uncrowned.com, and there they are. The man and the myth.
What's up, fellas?
Chuck, what is this?
What's going on?
Listen. You said you were going to meet a celebrity. I thought you were segue. You're so masterful at these segues. I thought you were going to say the name here, the myth. But
no.
Pierre wins on this one. Fellas, I'm representing
I really didn't
Denver.
know we were.
I'm representing
I really
Denver
didn't know
guys because I know you guys are fledgling fans just like me, and it's been a full year since I've been able to taste that championship. So I know you guys can relate to the frustrations I'm feeling over here. In Denver.
Look at this guy.
Oh, get out of here! We're doing this already.
Yeah. We doing it.
I noticed, Shaheen, the flag is front. That flag isn't usually up there, and now it's just like smacking.
Special
in the
occasion
face.
flag.
When does the season start? By the way, do you guys know?
Oh boy.
I think like
it was a sort.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't need to get too far.
Chuck, you feeling good about that cap situation? You feeling good about this max contract for Aaron
They
Gordon?
got my boy
Jamal
locked
Murray,
up. They got Gordon locked up.
Jamal Murray's been killing it, man. You guys are great.
I will say this, and we don't need to go too far into this. When Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks, there was one person who was banging the drum that I'm going to be the happiest person on the planet. That is Shaheen. Did I get that wrong? No, it would be that way. That is Shaheen Al-Shatti. You didn't tell me that he was going to start shooting like Ben Simmons all of a sudden. I don't know what's going on over there, but thanks. Things are looking great. The confidence is very high.
I really don't know why you guys broke Mikal. He's like my favorite son since Steve Nash.
Yeah.
He does not look like he used to. I don't know what this is going on. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, me neither. But we'll figure it out. I have no doubt about that. Chuck, I will start with you. UFC 308, sure. Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria. You just posted an amazing article on Uncrowned.com, cheap plug, entitled "The Cult of Max Holloway." What does that mean? What does the cult of Max Holloway mean to you?
You might remember the time that you and I did a piece on Nate Diaz, where we were you did the narrative and I wrote the piece. I kind of see him in that same vein. He's a guy where wins and losses don't tell the story of a guy like Max, but it's somehow his longevity, his lovability, his character, just bringing the nation, bringing Hawaii into the picture. It's all of those things, facing the baddest man on the planet, the point downs, taking ill-advised fights, kind of ignoring his public at times and coming out on the right side of these challenges like he did with Justin Gaethje. It all just adds up to this very specific kind of figure who I think almost transcends belts at this point. And that's how I kind of judge it. I was like, have we entered that cult phase where it doesn't really matter? Max Holloway is just a cult figure in our game. He kind of is. And he's weird because he warps your sense of time. Coming in at UFC at 20 years old, he's been in it for a dozen years. He's only 32 years old. This is most guys' prime. He's been in a lot of fights, obviously a lot of wars, but it's crazy that he's only 32 years old and he's in this spot.
Shaheen, I listened to Ilia, and you listen to the confidence, and you listen to the way in which he speaks about what he is going to do to Max. And it is, I hate to say it because I know Max calls him a Conor copycat, but it does feel like the first time since Conor that we have someone who is just so blatantly, for lack of a better word, disrespectful about who is in front of him. And I don't mean disrespectful like he talks about Max's family or, he actually is quite complimentary of him. Even when they did the face-to-face with Brendan Fitzgerald, he said like, oh yeah, I did watch you. I did look up to you. I did want to fight you. But he dismisses him as a threat so easily and just so like, yeah, this is going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be even easier than the Volk fight. It does feel somewhat reminiscent of Conor circa 2015, 2016, does it not?
I mean, people are going to hate that, but it does, right? Because all three of us were around during that rise, and there's a special recipe, like a secret sauce that comes into play when you have someone who's sort of calling their shot in the way that Conor did, in the way that Ilia has so far, right? I mean, Mystic Mac, that was the whole legend with Conor before he was even a champion. He's calling his, hey, first round knockout, this is going to be a second round knockout, et cetera, and almost every single time it seemed to prove true. To see someone be as disrespectful to a legend like Jose Aldo as Conor did for so long, the World Tour, all of it, it's very reminiscent of now what we've seen with Ilia. I mean, this is a man who changed his Instagram bio to UFC featherweight champion long before he ever knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. Usually you go into these type of fights, these type of title defenses or title challenges, whether it's the Volk or the Holloway one for Ilia, And there's a level of reverentialness, there's a level of deferentialness as well that the non-legend brings into it, right? Of, okay, like, I'm here to win. I know I can win, but also this guy standing across from me has done XYZ, and it's incredible. And, I hold him in very high regard. That is completely absent for the most part for Ilia. And it's certainly like, it's a welcome, just it freshens up a fight week, if nothing else, right? Because we're so accustomed to the cut and paste nature of the UFC. If you have someone marching around with this much bravado, marching around, puffing their chest out to this insane degree, to where you're fighting Max Holloway, and you're telling me that it's going to be easy months after I just saw Max essentially commit murder on national television against Justin Gaethje, like years and years of all of these incredible Max Holloway moments that Chuck so aptly summed up in his column today, in his article today. It's really, frankly, like, unusual, but like, just it's a car crash in the sense that you can't look away. This is my most anticipated fight of 2024, or at least what we have left on the calendar. I cannot wait for this.
Yeah, it feels like a 50-50 fight, despite the fact that Ilia is so dismissive of Max. And I have to say, I didn't see this coming, Chuck. I really didn't see this coming in this sense. After the third Volkanovski fight, I thought, okay, now here comes the crash, so to speak. Like, he's not getting knocked out, but he's in there for a long time. He's taking a lot of shots. He's been fighting for a very long time. We saw him as, a super young kid all those years ago. What was it, 2012? Or early 2013 when we were first introduced to him. No, I think it was 2012 off the top of my head.
As a 20-year-old. He was the youngest guy in the UFC.
20-year-old against Dustin Poirier, right? So it's been a long-ass time. And then since then, Arnold Allen, Korean Zombie, and then the Gaethje fight that Shaheen just mentioned. I didn't see this coming, and I still do wonder at some point, okay, it comes for everyone, right? Like that falling off a cliff, especially when you put yourself out there like he does, comes and gets everyone. Is there any part of you that thinks it is coming on Saturday?
There's always that possibility, and I think a guy like that carries the kind of power that Ilia does, he raises a specific kind of danger for a guy like Max who gets hit. I think we saw it's like 2,000 some significant strikes he's eaten over the course of his career. So that's always like a factor. But then you think back to some of the fights where I thought that Max was at that point, like Brian Ortega, for instance. When he's fighting Brian Ortega, it was already at the cusp of, like, maybe he's already losing his shine. The Calvin Kattar fight on ABC, he landed 735 total significant strikes over the course of those two fights. It's absurd what he's able to do sometimes, and just make adjustments, the kind of space he creates in between, the kind of rhythms he finds within these fights. It's just, I never would have seen it coming that he was going to get into this spot, but he's getting a little more masterful, actually, at how to handle these fights as time goes on. And that's what makes this so intriguing to me, man. It's just, you got a guy with power. If he can't get Max out of there in the first couple of rounds, what does that look like? I just feel like Max, he could be turning it on at that point. And I mean, it could be Max's fight. It's just, this is one of those true 50-50 fights for me.
Shaheen, go ahead.
Just if I could add to that, frankly, it's reaching a point where it's without parallel, right? Like, because we've seen younger guys come into this game, start at the age that Max started in the UFC, and then they reach a certain point, and especially right around now in their early 30s, especially if they've gone through the type of wars that Max had. Chuck mentioned the significant strike numbers that he's eaten, not the ones that he's landed. I always think back to Rory McDonald, right? Rory McDonald comes into the UFC, immediate title contender, challenges for the title. In his early 20s, he was supposed to be that next guy. And then by the time he's in his 30s, he's flaming out. He's very much done. He's over it. It's just been too much on his body. And he's out of the sport by his early 30s or his mid 30s, essentially. For what Max is doing is just crazy at this point. It's almost without parallel, in the sense that, like, Jose Aldo is really the only other lighter weight fighter I can think of, just off the top of my head at least, that has been able to extend his career and can maintain at this peak absolute apex level this deep into it. It's because it's not how old you are, right? It's fight years, and the fight years have added up so much to Max. There's been so many moments where it felt like, just as Chuck said, that the bottom was about to fall out. Even that Brian Ortega one, that was right after Max had that very bizarre interview before the Khabib fight that never happened, and it just felt like he was almost like the CTE was already, like, kind of being, you were able to see it almost, because he was like slurring his words, and he was in his mid-20s at that point.
Yeah, we
are so far removed from that at this point, and he seems like he's getting better. Like, when that Justin Gaethje fight was booked earlier this year, I was one of the dumb ones, genuinely worried for Max, because I was there in Atlanta when he fought Dustin Poirier at lightweight and took so much damage against Dustin Poirier. And it's like, we've seen this before. And that felt like the same thing was going to happen again. And then he pulls off the knockout of forever. And it's incredible, the 9 lives that this man has had. And the fact that at this point it's 2024 and he probably is the best version of himself that we have ever seen.
Those are 2 really good callbacks. Also, knockout of forever is a great line. We all remember how he sounded in that UFC Tonight interview. That was 2018. That was 2018 when he's speaking like that, and then he gets pulled from that fight. And then we all remember a year later in Atlanta, the damage that he took against Poirier. And I think everyone probably thought like there's a year or 2 left here. Now it's 2024, and here he is fighting for a belt, a well-earned belt. It's not like he's being gifted this. But yesterday, Dan Hardy did mention to us he thinks he's better suited at 55 these days. We do forget the concern, oh my God, he's going back to 55 against Gaethje. Holy shit, he's going to get smoked. This is a mistake. He's that close to a title shot. And then look what he does. And now no one is speaking about that. And I sort of forgot about that concern until Hardy mentioned it yesterday. You do notice his face is sunken in. You do notice that it is gaunt. Do you agree with that, Chuck? Do you think that he is better at 55, or does it not matter these days with Max because he is just so damn good?
I mean, he's looked good at both weights, but I honestly do believe like you get into a certain age where that weight cut, man, and he does cut weight. I mean, it's like it's obvious that he has to cut down to 145, and it's a strain. I think after seeing the Gaethje fight, it changed my mind a little bit. I was basing all evidence, just like Sean was saying, basically on that first Poirier fight, or the second Poirier fight, I guess, but the one that they fought at 155. And he looked undersized. I think that he would be better off long term if he's how long he wants to go at lightweight. I think that at some point, man, you get into your 30s like that, and so many wars. Like, what is this? His 30th pro fight or his 30th fight in the UFC? I think it just comes a time where it makes sense to be at 155 for him.
What are you leaning towards, Shaheen? What are you thinking? What are you feeling right now? I just combined thinking, feeling, and thinking right there. I said thinking. What do you? You know what? I might run with that. What are you feeling, and what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
It fits with what this week is, right? Because this very much feels like a vibes type of week, just because of this magical run that Max is on. This run that, again, 2 years ago felt so impossible after he loses for a 3rd time against Volkanovski, and it feels like the bottom is we finally reached it, or at least it's about to fall out. It's difficult for me because I started this year predicting that Ilia Topuria was going to end the year as champion. He has felt to me from the moment I saw him first in the UFC, from the inception of all of this run, that he has carried every element of just a guy who is going to carry this belt for a long, long time. Maybe not in the featherweight division. There are not long-time champions outside of Jose Aldo. I mean, I guess that's not true. Max and Volk had it for a good time, but there's not like a John Jones-esque type of champion who carries it for a long time. But Ilia felt like a guy who could reach that Max Volk level to me in terms of longevity. But just the vibes, man. This feels like a vibes pick for me. I know that's not the most technical breakdown, but I'm just so impressed by what Max has been able to do, and the fortitude and just the strength to continue to grow and carry on in these lighter weight divisions and fend back challenger after challenger after challenger. If you look, Chuck mentioned the 30 UFC fights. If you look at the last 20, I bet you there's not a bad name in that bunch. This man has faced killers left, right, and center for years upon years upon years, stacking bodies, and it still just continues. It's just crazy to me. So just on vibes alone, I feel like this is the completion of a story, right? This does feel like this type of rare instance we get in some of these title fights where a story is being written, a movie is being filmed, and this is Max Holloway's movie. No one thought he would be able to come back and win this featherweight title, and all of a sudden this perfect confluence of events happens. He has this incredible year. And I think by the end of this year, we're going to be talking about a real debate, whether it's Alex Pereira or Max Holloway for Fighter of the Year, because I think Max goes in there and gets it done and just completes this in incredible fashion.
Wow. This guy. That was something. By the way, that would be incredible. There's still no chance he's the Fighter of the Year. Come on, you can't do that to Alex.
No. I think he makes it a debate. Obviously, it's Alex because the whole year has been about Alex, right? He has saved the UFC, has single-handedly carried the UFC on his back. But if Max goes in there and scores a knockout or just does something outrageous, as Max tends to do in these moments, and then we have the Gaethje knockout on top of that, there will be people making that debate.
Fair. What about you, Chuck? What are you thinking?
What if Max wins this fight and then fights again in December and wins that one? Is he your Fighter of the Year then?
Okay, now we've got something.
Okay, all right. This is one of the tougher ones, man. I've gone back and forth, but I think I'm leaning on Ilia in the end. And the reason being is we've seen guys like him, 27 years old, not quite like him. Obviously, he represents a whole different type of new blood in this game, man. Like he's that good. 5 finishes in his first 7 fights, and he seems like he's built for the spotlight. But man, I just don't see his reign ending this quickly. And I feel like he's still got, like, a lot of times when we're talking about younger guys who get a lot coming to them early, complacency sets in. They have to learn a hard lesson. I don't feel like he's anywhere near that yet. I feel like he's still in that prove it mode. And this is such a big name in the industry, Max Holloway. So I think he's given it his full attention. I think it means the world to him to go in there and win this fight. And I just think his power is going to translate. I think once he, I know Max has that granite chin, man, but once he lands that kind of power, Topuria's power on him, I could see the end coming pretty quick for Max. As crazy as it is, because I wrote this piece and I was trying to convince myself, I'm still leaning Ilia on this one.
One fun little storyline this week is just, to me at least, the fact that Volk is everywhere. Like, I keep just seeing him walking around the hotel. He's shaking hands. He's just letting everyone know, I'm here, I'm fit, I'm ready to go, I got next. If you're Alex Volkanovski, Shaheen, what's the better scenario for you? Because there are some guys coming up, maybe no clear-cut better answer, but there are some guys who haven't had a chance to fight for the belt at 145. Are you rooting for Max, who you have those wins against, or are you rooting for Topuria, who beat you back in February?
I think if I'm Alex, I'm probably rooting for Ilia just because that's the type of guy that Alex is. To me, I would rather not, like, if I'm Alex, I would rather not fight Ilia again. It feels like that's just a very poor stylistic matchup for him. He obviously has Max's number. I think if you're Alex, you have a clearer path to win that belt back if Max wins. But, Volk's the type of guy, he wants that one back, and that's all he's been thinking about for months. So I'm sure he wants Ilia to win just because, again, I don't know that the appetite is there for Volk Max 4, even if this is a reverse type of situation where Max is the champion. But I think either way, Volk is golden. He's got next regardless. So I'm sure it isn't too important to him.
What do you think, Chuck? If you're Volk, who are you rooting for?
I agree with Sean. I think that's probably the scenario. I agree that he could beat Holloway. Like, we've seen this obviously, but how much can you keep getting up for the same fight? I know that he's in a position where he has to, otherwise he just starts to go away from the top 5. But I think that he's a competitor that way, man. I think that's he's going to want Ilia. He's going to want to get that back. We saw it with Islam, right? He wanted that one back. He took a very ill-advised fight, and I think he's in that situation again.
Do you guys think there's any scenario, and I'll ask you, Shaheen, do you think there's any scenario where it's not Volk next? Is it possible it goes to Diego Lopez? If one or the other wins, is it possible? I heard Yair Rodriguez saying perhaps Arnold Allen is next for him, so I don't think he's necessarily in the mix. It seems like Diego's the only one that could screw this up. Do you think there's any scenario, meaning if this guy wins or if that guy wins, where Diego usurps Volk?
No. I mean, right now, this is the 3 kings of the division, right? It's Max, Ilia, and Volk. We're going to do this round robin for at least another little bit before we start moving on to other names, and it's deserved. I mean, 2 of these guys have incredible legacies, and another one seems like the next guy to build an incredible legacy. So, barring injury, it has to be Volk in my mind.
Chuck, we were talking earlier about whether or not Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev is a number 1 contender fight. You never know these days. Who the hell knows? And what does it all really mean? It's a fantastic fight, and it feels like it could potentially be the referendum that we have been waiting on who Khamzat really is, right? He fights once a year. He has a good performance. He doesn't have a good performance. We thought he'd be champion by now. But you get by Robert Whittaker, you're championship material. Just ask Dricus du Plessis. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What is your sense saying about Khamzat and whether or not he can actually get by this test? Because I have to say, everything Robert is saying, the confidence he's exuding, and just his look, like you see the photos of him, the guy looks like he's on point. He just fought back in June. He's getting right back in there. Strong performance against Ankalaev, wiped away any doubt that he is still one of the top dogs at 85. I really am curious to see if Khamzat could get by this test, and I wouldn't be surprised if he can't, just because Whittaker is just still that damn good.
I mean, the Ankalaev fight to me seemed very scary for Whittaker, given the circumstances where it's a switching opponent. And look how he handled that. Less than 2 minutes, man. He puts him away, and it was just one of those performances where you're like, why would I ever doubt Robert Whittaker? I love this fight. See, both of these fights are so fascinating to me at the top, like because Robert Whittaker, we've seen for years what a savage he is, but we've also seen him lose, like to Dricus du Plessis, where it didn't seem like he was on the same level, and it was crazy. Like it was shocking in that sense. So you're not exactly sure what you're going to get here, but I do think that like with Chimaev, this is the big prove it moment in my mind. I mean, obviously, like fighting a guy like Usman in his last fight was a big deal, but this is a guy who traditionally doesn't fight at this weight class. And we've seen him, we saw him beat a guy like Holland, but of course, that's a tailor made fight for him. So to me, it's like you get into a situation where if you can get through and especially go right through a guy like Robert Whittaker, it becomes very compelling. And I think that all of those original, us dog-earing this guy and saying like he's going to be the next champion of that division, it comes roaring back to life. But the reason it has died down so much is, like you said, inactivity, the 50-50 nature of will he show up on fight night, his kind of visa issues or whatever, can he fight outside of the Middle East, all these things coming in, they'll all go away, at least for a minute, if he's able to do that kind of work against Whittaker.
So who are you leaning towards, Chuck?
I'm going to lean towards Chimaev, but I hate doing this because I think last time I declared that I wouldn't go against Whittaker again. But man, there's just I still think that the times when Chimaev is on and he's just ragdolling guys in there and just relentless and just the pressure and everything else, I don't think he gets beat. So I'm going to go off of that. Like the best form of him will prevail over even Robert Whittaker and his doggedness. I think that in the end, he'll be too much for Rob.
What do you think, Shaheen?
So funny to call this his prove it moment. It feels like we've had 20 different prove it moments with Khamzat, especially 2 years ago against Gilbert Burns. That was the prove it moment, and then it ended up leading to nothing. No, you're right though. You're 100% right. It's just a very bizarre. Like I can't think of a lot of comparisons for the weird nature of this career that we've watched with Khamzat so far and how elongated it's gotten, just like artificially almost. To me, I agree with everything you said, Chuck, but I cannot get the Kamaru Usman fight out of my mind. The fact that the watching Khamzat fade down the stretch, just as he did against Gilbert Burns a little bit as well. Bobby Knuckles is not that guy, man. Like you cannot do that against Robert Whittaker. He's going to be in there from bell to bell, and he's going to be pushing the action the entire time. Middleweight is just a different demon than welterweight. I don't know, man. It's hard for me at this point to pick against Robert Whittaker just based on how unreliable Khamzat has been. And just like, again, some of these performances, man, are not the world-beating performances that we expected from this man. So I've been on the Khamzat train forever. Every single year for the past several years, I've predicted that he's going to end the year as champion. It feels foolish to maybe jump off now when that maybe is actually about to start happening. But I just can't pick against Robert Whittaker in this fight. This just feels like Robert Whittaker's moment to have his y'all must have forgot type of performance.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Sean's repping the old guys, like old guard. I love it.
I like it. I like it. He is an old soul. There's no doubt about that. And I could see it happening. I'm looking right now. As of right now, according to BetMGM, Topuria minus 250, Holloway plus 200. And with regards to this co-main event fight, 5 rounds, by the way, minus 275 Khamzat, plus 210 Robert. I 100% think that the 2 extra rounds favors Whittaker. I think everyone would agree, right? Based on the cardio issues that we saw against Gilbert Burns for Khamzat. So I think that that's going to be fascinating theater. And I don't know how exciting Ankalaev Rakic will be, but I think the stakes are massive. I think there's a world where if Ankalaev wins via decision, he's not getting a title shot. I think Ankalaev has to do something spectacular, and it's a wild thing. And I think if Rakic wins, the UFC gives them like triple the bonus to be like, thank you very much. We appreciate everything you've done. You agree, Chuck?
Well, we just did it runs tomorrow. We just did a roundtable basically asking this very question. And what you said echoes exactly what I was saying. It's like get Cry Live warming up in the bullpen,
Yeah.
That's kind of they're gonna expedite somebody else. Man. They'll find a way.
What do you think?
It's so unfair. It's so unfair. Like Ankalaev has gotten this weird reputation as this boring guy who puts on these boring fights. The Jan Blachowicz fight was a perfectly fine fight. It was actually like a pretty good show of heart by Ankalaev to be able to push through the leg kick situation, like really perform as well as he did in the later rounds. Comes back, knocks out Johnny Walker after the weird one in the first fight. And he still just has this rep because Dana White had a bad night that night against whatever the Blachowicz night was, and just really like buried them in a crazy way for no reason. Ankalaev is like a perfectly fine fighter. He's not that interesting outside of the cage, but he's going to have to win 40 fights in a row to get a shot at Alex Pereira. It's ridiculous the way this is playing out.
If he gets a stoppage, though, I think he gets it, right? If he gets a stoppage,
you have to.
Maybe.
And for the record, I don't think this is fair. I think if he wins, he should get it. I don't think this is fair. I'm just saying what it seems to be. I think winning streaks should mean something. I didn't think it was fair when Leon didn't get it. I didn't think it was fair when Bilal didn't get it. I don't think it's fair that Magomed isn't getting it. Sometimes the best guy isn't the flashiest, most exciting guy, but the UFC is staring at a period now where a lot of not so flashy, not so exciting, not so popular guys are becoming champions, and I think they're trying to curb that as much as possible.
The dude is unbeaten in his 12 fights in the UFC, like in a row, right? Dozen fights after the fixed fight against Paul Craig, which we've talked about. But so he's on this kind of roll. I don't think you can deny him, but I just don't think I don't get any indication. I know that they didn't want to be in the Bilal business necessarily. I kind of feel like they don't want to be in the Ankalaev business. I pointed this out. It's like,
kind of
pudding.
Yeah,
they definitely don't.
But it's one of those things, like, especially when you have Pereira, like, you finally have this golden goose who's like doing it all for you, and he's doing like compelling, casual eyes to your sport and everything like that. It gets very murky very quick when you look at all the politics inside of that and why they wouldn't want him there. But like I said, I was saying, like, tapioca pudding. Nobody wants to market tapioca pudding. It's like it's one of those type of things, and unfortunately that's where Ankalaev is right now.
There's actually a great rice pudding spot here in New York called From Rice to Riches. It's still standing after like 15 years. So, I mean, I don't know if that's...
I'll have to check that out.
I don't know if that's rice pudding and is tapioca the same as rice pudding. I don't know, but pretty darn
I think
close.
they're different pellets. I don't know. It's like little gelatinous things. I don't know what that is.
Definitely not the same thing.
Definitely not the same.
Tapioca pudding is just the greatest comparison that I've ever heard from. And that's you can only get this from the myth.
I agree. You've got Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. Lerone on fire. Ige's got all the fan support after what he did back in June. Shower bullet against Armin Petrosian, and a fight that's completely flying under the radar. Jeff Neal versus RDA. Rafael Dos Anjos. A ton of coverage over at Uncrowned.com. Shaheen just absolutely killing it as editor-in-chief.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just I don't know if he's slept yet in the last few weeks. But he is absolutely smashing it. Yes, your new home of combat sports with the likes of Chuck Mindenhall and Ben Folks and Drake Riggs and so many others doing such great things on the MMA side of things. PT Carroll, of course. Let's not forget about PT dusting off the old keyboard, if you will. And then, of course, on the wrestling and boxing side, plenty of coverage on the Fury Usyk press conference that's going down today. And, of course, Catterall Prograis this weekend as well on Saturday. So tremendous stuff, guys. Thank you so much. Great to do this. We will do it more often. I appreciate you both very much.
Thanks,
Thumbs
fellas.
up in the chat. Thumbs up in the chat.
Yeah, there they are. Chuck, Shaheen, the man, the myth. Great to have them on. Thanks for watching this video. Hey, before you go, do me a favor. Hit that sub button. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the little bell thingy as well. Leave us a nice comment or two. We appreciate you all very much.